My parents treated me like their maid, until the CEO they were desperate to impress looked at me and said, "Hello, boss. My name is Victoria Reynolds and I'm 29 years old." For 12 years, my controlling parents treated me like their personal housemaid while my younger brother Jake lived like a prince. Every family barbecue, every holiday gathering, I was scrubbing dishes while he entertained guests on the deck. But last 4th of July weekend, when my mother demanded I cater an elaborate dinner party for 30 of Jake's networking contacts with just 48 hours notice, something inside me finally snapped. What happened next didn't just shatter our family dynamic. It exposed a truth that left everyone, including a Fortune 500 CEO, absolutely stunned. Before I tell you how I went from being the family servant to watching my parents beg for my forgiveness, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy stories about justice being served. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below, I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to that sweltering July evening when everything changed forever. I was in my Chicago apartment, carefully packing designer clothes into my Louis Vuitton suitcase when my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Mom, and I already knew this conversation would ruin my weekend plans. In our suburban Dallas mansion, patriotic decorations hung from every doorframe. I knew because I'd been the one hanging them every year since I was 16, while Jake played video games in his room. "Victoria, cancel whatever little plans you have for this weekend," my mother Barbara said without so much as a hello. Her voice carried that familiar commanding tone that brooked no argument. I continued folding my Armani blazer. "What's happening this weekend?" "Jake's hosting his business network for a 4th of July celebration. Very important people, Victoria. 30 guests, including executives from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey." She paused, and I could practically hear her smug smile through the phone. "You'll need to arrive by Friday afternoon to start preparing. I've planned a complete Texas barbecue spread, brisket, ribs, sides, the works. Plus elegant appetizers for the networking portion." My fingers tightened around my iPhone. Jake's business network. Of course. My younger brother worked as a junior analyst at a mid-tier consulting firm and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how connected he was in the Dallas business scene. "Mom, I have. Jake's making important connections that benefit this entire family. You should be grateful to help." Her words cut like they always did. "It's not like you have anything else going on anyway." I glanced at my laptop where an email from Robert Hayes, CEO of Hayes Industries, glowed on the screen. If only my mother knew who was waiting to meet with me. "Use the good china and crystal," she continued. "These aren't your usual crowd, Victoria. These are people who actually matter. People who matter, unlike me, apparently. I'll text you the complete menu and timeline," she said dismissively. "And Victoria, don't embarrass us this time." The line went dead. I stared at my first-class ticket to Los Angeles. Departure time, 6 p.m. Friday. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. After 12 years of this treatment, I'd finally learned the difference between their emergency and my priority. Memories flooded back like a toxic tide. 12 years of being invisible except when they needed something. Every Thanksgiving since I was 17, Victoria will handle all the cooking while Jake mingles with our guests. Every Christmas, Victoria's between jobs again, but at least she's useful in the kitchen. Every family gathering where Jake was introduced as our successful son in consulting while I was simply Victoria's here too, she's helping with the food. The worst had been Jake's college graduation party 3 years ago. 200 guests at the country club, and I'd spent 16 hours preparing hors d'oeuvres while Jake held court in his new Armani suit that our parents bought him. When one of the guests asked what I did for work, my mother had actually laughed. Victoria doesn't have Jake's business acumen, but she certainly knows her way around a kitchen. I stood up and walked to my walk-in closet, pulling out my second suitcase. Inside, carefully protected in a leather portfolio, was the contract that would change everything. My company's name, Apex Hospitality Solutions, was embossed in gold at the top. I'd deliberately chosen a name that didn't include Reynolds. For 6 years, I'd built my empire in silence. 75 employees across 4 major cities. A client roster that included luxury hotels, Fortune 500 companies, and A-list celebrities. And tomorrow, while my family expected me to slave over their outdoor grill, I had the meeting that would secure a $5 million exclusive contract. My phone buzzed with Jake's text, "Mom says you're cooking this weekend. Try not to mess it up. Important people will be there, including some Goldman executives I've been trying to impress. I looked at my boarding pass again. Flight 892 to LAX, departing at 6 p.m. Not this time, I whispered to my reflection. For once, they'd have to figure it out themselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 glaring signs had shown me exactly where I stood in this family, and I'd ignored them for far too long. The first sign was how they introduced me at social gatherings. At the country club just last month, my father had told his golf partner, Jake's our rising star, he's already climbing the corporate ladder. Victoria's, well, she's still finding her path. Still finding my path. I'd closed $1 million deal that very morning, but to them, I was perpetually directionless, perpetually failing. They never asked about my work, never wondered how I afforded my luxury Chicago high-rise or my BMW. Their assumption was so complete that when I mentioned traveling for business once, my mother had scoffed, "What business? Are you calling your little catering hobby a business now?" The second sign was even more devastating. Last Christmas, I'd come home to find my childhood bedroom converted into Jake's home office expansion. My trophies, my books, every trace of my existence in that house had been boxed up and shoved into the garage. Jake needed the space for his consulting work, my mother had explained as if it were obvious. Image matters in his field, and clients might visit. Meanwhile, Jake had been given the entire 3rd floor, renovated with our parents' money, complete with a home gym and entertainment center. The message was crystal clear: one child was an investment, the other was disposable. I zipped my suitcase closed, thinking about my company's recent celebration dinner. 75 employees who respected my leadership, who saw my value, who had just toasted our biggest year yet. My phone displayed the group photo from that night, all of us laughing, celebrating our success together. But my family had never even been curious. Not once in 6 years had anyone asked, "So Victoria, what exactly do you do all day?" They'd created their own narrative. Poor Victoria can't hold down a real job. Lives paycheck to paycheck in some tiny apartment. The tiny apartment was actually a 2,000 square foot penthouse, probably blowing through her trust fund. I'd invested that money to start my business. At least she's useful for cooking. I employed 3 James Beard award-winning executive chefs. The deepest cut was their complete lack of interest. They'd never asked to see my apartment, never wondered about my life, never questioned how I could afford designer clothes on an unemployed person's budget. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my recent achievements. There was the feature article in Forbes about innovative hospitality entrepreneurs. There was the photo of me accepting the Rising Star Award from the National Restaurant Association. There was the spread in Architectural Digest showcasing the luxury event I designed for a tech billionaire's wedding. None of these moments had been shared with my family. I'd learned early that success without their permission somehow threatened them. Tomorrow's meeting would change everything. Hayes Industries wasn't just another client. They were looking for an exclusive hospitality partner for all their corporate events, executive retreats, and international conferences. The contract was worth $5 million annually, with potential for expansion. Robert Hayes himself had insisted on meeting personally. "I only work with entrepreneurs who've built something from nothing," he told me during our preliminary call. "No trust fund babies or family money success stories. I want someone who understands real hustle." If he only knew how true that was. My phone rang, my mother again. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back. "Victoria, I hope you're already on your way to the airport. Jake's colleagues from Goldman will be there, and this could be a huge opportunity for our family's reputation. Don't let us down." Our family's reputation. Built on Jake's mediocre consulting job and my invisible labor. I looked at my plane ticket one more time, then at the contract that would make me a multimillionaire. The choice had never been clearer. I called my mother back. She answered before the first ring. "Finally. I was starting to worry you weren't taking this seriously." "Mom, I can't do it." Silence. Then her voice turned icy. "What do you mean you can't?" "I have a business meeting in Los Angeles. I'm flying out tonight." "Don't be ridiculous." Her voice rose an octave. "What possible business could you have that's more important than family?" "An important contract negotiation." She actually laughed, that cruel, dismissive sound I'd heard too many times. "Victoria, stop with the fantasies. What contract? What business? You're unemployed." I'm a CEO, Mom. Another laugh, even more condescending. A CEO of what? Your imaginary catering company. Apex Hospitality Solutions. We have 75 employees and locations in 4 cities. Victoria, enough with the delusions. Jake needs this weekend to go perfectly. These Goldman executives could change his career trajectory. You owe this family. I owe you. The words erupted before I could stop them. For what? Treating me like hired help for 12 years. We raised you, fed you, gave you everything. You gave Jake everything. You gave me chores. You're being dramatic. What else do you have to do anyway? Sit alone in your studio apartment. I looked around my penthouse living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It's not a studio. Whatever it is, cancel your fantasy meeting and get on a plane to Dallas. Jake's future depends on this. And my future? What future? You don't even have a job. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to cave like I always did. The old Victoria would have already been rebooking her flight, already mentally planning the menu for 30 people. I have a flight to catch, Mom. If you get on that plane, don't bother coming home. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. She'd used it before, and it had always worked. The threat of losing my family had kept me compliant, kept me small, kept me serving. Then I guess this is goodbye. You can't be serious. I'm done being the family maid, Mom. I'm done being invisible until you need something. You ungrateful. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear or hurt. It was from the pure adrenaline of finally choosing myself. My phone immediately exploded with texts from Jake. What the hell did you just do? Mom's having a complete meltdown. Get your act together and get down here now. Do you have any idea what you've just ruined? I turned off my phone and finished packing. They'd figure it out. Rich people always did when they had to. An hour later, I turned my phone back on to call an Uber. It immediately rang. Jake this time. Victoria, what is wrong with you? He shouted. Mom's calling everyone in the family saying you've lost your mind. I have a business meeting, Jake. A $5 million contract. Stop lying. Mom told me about your imaginary CEO fantasy. This is about that fight we had last month when I got your old room, isn't it? My old room had been converted to his office 3 years ago, not last month, but I didn't bother correcting him. This is about my actual career. What career? You cook sometimes for pocket change. I own a hospitality company with 75 employees. Sure you do. His voice dripped sarcasm. Look, I'll pay you to cook this weekend. How's $500? My standard rate for private chef services was $8,000 per day. Not that he'd ever know. This isn't negotiable, Jake. Mom will disown you. That's her choice. You're really going to ruin my networking opportunity? These Goldman guys could change everything for me. Then hire a caterer. On 4th of July weekend? Are you insane? No one's available. I walked to my kitchen counter where I'd left a notepad with 3 emergency catering services that handled last-minute bookings. It was more than they deserved, but I wasn't completely heartless. There are companies that specialize in last-minute events. I'm not driving to Chicago to get some random phone numbers from you. Then Google Emergency Catering Dallas. This is selfish, Victoria. Family comes first. Family comes first when you need a servant. When have any of you put me first? He had no answer for that. I have a plane to catch. If you do this, you're dead to us. I looked around my beautiful apartment, at my successful life they'd never bothered to see. I'm already invisible to you. What's the difference? The Uber notification chimed. My ride to a hair had arrived. I hung up on my brother and headed for the door, leaving behind the family that had never really seen me anyway. The plane lifted off from a hair at exactly 6:15 p.m., and I finally exhaled. Below me, Chicago's skyline sparkled in the evening light. Somewhere in another state, my mother was probably frantically calling every relative, painting me as the selfish daughter who abandoned family for some made-up business meeting. I pulled out my laptop and opened the Hayes Industries file. The contract details still took my breath away: $5 million annually for exclusive hospitality services across all Hayes properties and corporate events. But it wasn't just about the money. This partnership would establish Apex Hospitality as a major player in the luxury corporate market. My email showed 23 new messages from Robert Hayes' team, all confirming tomorrow's schedule. The welcome dinner at 7 p.m. tonight at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The formal presentation at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The contract signing immediately after, pending board approval. I clicked on Robert's latest email. Looking forward to finally meeting you in person, Victoria. I've been following Apex's growth for 18 months. Your reputation for building something extraordinary from scratch precedes you. My reputation. If only he knew that the same woman he was about to partner with was supposed to be grilling brisket for her brother's colleagues right now. A text from my assistant came through the plane's Wi-Fi. Business Weekly wants to run a feature on young entrepreneurs who built their companies without family money. They want to interview you next week. I typed back, schedule it for Tuesday. And yes, they can mention the self-made angle. Perfect timing. By the time my family realized who I really was, the business world would already know my story. I pulled up the draft interview questions Business Weekly had sent for approval. The headline read, "From Invisible to Industry Leader, How Victoria Reynolds Built a Hospitality Empire Without a Dollar of Family Support." The universe had a sense of humor about timing. My phone buzzed with notifications: 57 missed calls from my mother, 23 from Jake, even 5 from my usually silent father. I deleted the voicemails without listening and opened my email instead. My marketing director had sent exciting news. Victoria, the food and wine feature is confirmed for next month's cover. They want to focus on your journey from unknown to unstoppable. Also, the James Beard Foundation wants to discuss having you host their next awards gala. The cover of Food and Wine. My photo would be in every grocery store checkout line, every upscale restaurant waiting area. The article would detail how I'd built Apex from a $10,000 investment into a multi-million-dollar empire. Another email caught my attention, from Robert Hayes himself, sent just an hour ago. "Victoria, I'll be running a bit late to tonight's dinner. Coming straight from a business obligation in Dallas. Looking forward to our partnership discussion." Dallas. He was in Dallas right now, probably at some corporate event while my family scrambled to save their ruined party. I opened my phone's camera roll and scrolled through recent photos. There I was at the National Restaurant Association Awards, accepting the Innovation in Hospitality trophy. There was my team celebrating our newest office opening in Miami. There was the spread from Architectural Digest featuring the celebrity wedding I'd coordinated in the Hamptons. None of these achievements had been shared with my family. I'd learned years ago that success without their permission was somehow threatening to their carefully constructed narrative. My assistant texted again. "The Business Weekly journalist wants to know if your family will be mentioned in the article. They're curious about your support system." I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Tell them my family will discover my success when everyone else does. When the magazine hits stands." That's cold, boss. I respect it. I put my laptop away and looked out the window at the clouds below. In 3 hours, I'd be having dinner with one of the most powerful CEOs in America. In 14 hours, I'd sign the biggest deal of my career. In 1 week, my face would be on magazine covers nationwide. Meanwhile, my family was probably serving gas station snacks on their precious Waterford Crystal, explaining to confused guests why there was no food at their elaborate 4th of July party. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success they never saw coming. As I settled back in my first-class seat, I thought about the chaos unfolding in Dallas. According to the frantic texts I'd glimpsed before turning off notifications, the disaster was playing out exactly as expected. By 5 p.m. Central Time, my mother had realized I wasn't coming. The outdoor kitchen remained empty, the industrial grills cold, and 30 important guests would be arriving in 2 hours expecting a Texas barbecue feast. Jake's panicked messages painted the picture. "Mom's losing it. She's calling every restaurant in Dallas. Everything's booked for the holiday weekend." At 6:30, my father had finally texted, "Your mother is beside herself. Please reconsider." But the most telling message came from my mother at 6:45, "The caterers want $15,000 for last-minute service. We can't afford that for party food. Please come home." They couldn't afford it. The same family that had spent $50,000 renovating Jake's room couldn't afford proper catering for the party they demanded I handle for free. At exactly 7 p.m. Dallas time, just as my plane was descending into LAX, the guests had started arriving at my family's house. Investment bankers, consulting executives, and most importantly, Robert Hayes' Dallas-based business partners. They came expecting the elaborate spread my mother had been bragging about for weeks. Jake's final text before I'd blocked his number read, "We're ordering barbecue from 3 different places. Mom told everyone you had a family emergency, but everyone knows something's wrong. This is humiliating." Barbecue from 3 different restaurants, served on paper plates instead of the good china, because even the backup caterers were overwhelmed by the holiday demand. I smiled as my plane touched down in Los Angeles. Let them explain to their guests why the promised feast had turned into a fast food disaster. Let them make excuses for why their unemployed daughter couldn't be bothered to cook. Tomorrow, they'd learn who I really was. Tonight, I had a multi-million-dollar deal to close. The Beverly Hills Hotel was exactly as elegant as I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, and the scent of gardenias from the lobby arrangements reminded me why I'd fallen in love with the hospitality industry. I arrived early for the welcome dinner, wearing my favorite Chanel suit, the navy one that made me feel invincible. What I didn't expect was Robert Hayes walking in with a story that would change everything. "Victoria." He greeted me with a warm handshake, though he looked tired and slightly irritated. "I have to apologize for being late. I just flew in from the most bizarre business dinner in Dallas." My heart rate stayed perfectly steady. I'd prepared for this moment. "Oh? What happened?" "You won't believe this." He sat down, shaking his head. "I was invited to what was supposed to be an exclusive networking dinner by one of our junior consultants, kid named Jake Reynolds. Same last name as you, funny coincidence." I nodded, saying nothing. Jake had been talking up this elaborate Texas barbecue his family was hosting. "My mother's having everything catered by my sister, who's an amazing cook," he said. "Real Southern hospitality, the works." Robert signaled the waiter for a drink. I arrived to find absolute chaos. No food prepared, cold grills, and the hostess, Barbara Reynolds, scrambling to order takeout from multiple restaurants. That sounds awkward. It gets worse. She spent the entire evening making excuses and bad-mouthing her older daughter. Called her unreliable, directionless, a complete disappointment to the family. Apparently, this daughter was supposed to handle everything but just disappeared without warning. Robert pulled out his phone, showing me a photo someone had taken at the party. There was my mother, face flushed with embarrassment, standing behind a table covered in takeout containers from Smokey Joe's Barbecue and Rib Shack Express. Jake kept trying to salvage the situation, but it was painful to watch. He actually pitched me on some consulting services while we were eating gas station potato salad off paper plates. I managed to look appropriately sympathetic. "Did you stay long?" 20 minutes after the takeout arrived. The whole evening was so unprofessional that I started questioning Jake's judgment. If someone can't manage their own family dinner, how can they handle corporate consulting? Robert took a sip of his wine. The mother, Barbara, was particularly nasty about the absent daughter. Said she was too stupid to hold a real job and only good for cooking when she bothered to show up. My hands remained steady as I reached for my water glass. That's awful. I can't imagine speaking about family that way. Right? It was toxic. Robert opened his menu. Anyway, enough about that disaster. Let's discuss your incredible company. I've been following Apex's growth, and I'm genuinely impressed by what you've built. The irony was perfect. Robert Hayes had just witnessed my family's humiliation firsthand, and now he was sitting across from me, ready to make me a multimillionaire. "I'm curious," he continued. "Your bio mentions you built Apex without any family investment or connections. That's rare in this industry." "I wanted to prove that success doesn't require a famous name or family money," I said, which was absolutely true. "I believe in earning everything through merit." Robert raised his glass. "That's exactly the kind of partner we want. Someone who understands real hustle." If he only knew how real my hustle had been. The evening progressed beautifully. Robert's team was impressed by my presentation materials, my company's track record, and my vision for the partnership. By dessert, it was clear that tomorrow's formal meeting was just a formality. "Victoria," Robert said as we prepared to leave, "I have to tell you, after tonight's dinner disaster in Dallas, meeting you feels like finding an oasis in the desert. Your professionalism and competence are exactly what Hayes Industries values. I smiled graciously, thinking about my family's chaos while I'd been closing the deal of a lifetime. Thank you, Robert. I believe in delivering what I promise. As I headed back to my suite, my phone, which I'd kept on silent all evening, showed 93 missed calls and 47 text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I ordered room service and prepared for tomorrow's presentation. The next morning arrived with California sunshine streaming through my suite's windows. I dressed carefully in my power suit, the charcoal grey Armani that had never failed to make me feel confident. The Hayes Industries boardroom was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Beverly Hills, a mahogany table that could seat 20, and original artwork that probably cost more than most people's homes. Robert introduced me to his executive team, and the presentation began flawlessly. I outlined Apex's capabilities, our client testimonials, and our expansion plans. The numbers were impressive: 375% growth over 3 years, 0 client complaints, a waiting list that extended 8 months for peak season events. "Ms. Reynolds," said Janet Morrison, Hayes' chief operating officer, "your company's reputation precedes you. We've heard exceptional things about your team's work." "Thank you. We pride ourselves on exceeding expectations." "I'm particularly impressed by your trajectory," added David Kim, the CFO. "Building a company of this caliber without family money or industry connections shows remarkable determination." The presentation was going perfectly until Robert's assistant walked in with an iPad. "Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you asked me to monitor social media for any mentions of last night's Dallas event. There's something you need to see." Robert took the iPad, and I watched his expression shift from curiosity to confusion to complete shock. He looked up at me, then back at the screen, then at me again. "Victoria," he said slowly, "this is a photo from the Reynolds house in Dallas last night." He turned the iPad toward me. Someone had posted a family photo from my parents' living room, the professional portrait from 2 years ago where Jake stood prominently in the center while I was barely visible in the background, like hired help at my own family gathering. "Is this you?" I nodded calmly. "Yes." The room went completely silent. Robert's team exchanged glances. Janet Morrison put down her pen. David Kim leaned forward in his chair. "Barbara Reynolds, the woman who called you unemployable, is your mother?" "Yes." Robert stood up and walked to the window, then turned back to face me. "Let me understand this correctly. The woman who spent last night calling you a failure and a disappointment is your mother. And Jake Reynolds, the consultant whose party fell apart, is your brother." "That's correct." "You were supposed to cater that dinner, the one that turned into a takeout disaster." "I was expected to cook for 30 people, yes. But I chose to be here instead." Robert's business partner, James Chen, spoke up for the first time. "I'm sorry, but I need clarification. The woman serving gas station barbecue on paper plates last night has no idea her daughter runs one of the most successful hospitality companies on the West Coast." "None whatsoever. They think I'm unemployed." Robert started laughing, not a polite chuckle, but genuine, amazed laughter. "Oh my God. Barbara Reynolds spent the entire evening complaining about her loser daughter who can't do anything right. And that daughter is you, the CEO I've been trying to partner with for 6 months." He looked at his team. "Gentlemen, I think we're about to sign the most interesting contract of our careers." Robert pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. "I have to know something," he said, searching my name online. The results loaded instantly on the boardroom's main screen. Holy hell. Janet Morrison leaned forward as the search results appeared. The first hit was my recent Forbes feature article. The second was the Business Weekly announcement of my upcoming cover story. The third was a Wall Street Journal piece about innovative entrepreneurs under 30. "Your family doesn't know about any of this," David Kim said, scrolling through article after article documenting my success. "They've never asked about my life. They just assumed I was a failure and treated me accordingly." Robert was now reading from my Forbes profile. "Listen to this quote. I deliberately built my company without using family connections or money. I wanted to prove that success doesn't require a famous last name or inherited advantages." He looked up at me. "You weren't just avoiding family money. You were hiding your entire success from them. It was easier to build an empire in silence than fight their assumptions." James Chen whistled low. "So last night, When Barbara Reynolds was calling you unemployable, you were actually in Los Angeles closing a $5 million deal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Robert's assistant suddenly rushed back into the room. Mr. Hayes, there's more. The Dallas Morning News just posted an article about last night's party. It's gone viral on LinkedIn. He pulled up the article on the main screen. The headline read, "Networking Disaster, When Entitlement Meets Reality at Dallas Barbecue Gone Wrong." The article was brutal. Some guest had leaked details about the chaos, the takeout food served on fine china, and, most damaging, my mother's comments about her worthless daughter. The hostess spent more time complaining about her absent daughter than hosting her guests, Robert read aloud. Barbara Reynolds repeatedly called her older daughter a disappointment who can't hold a real job while serving gas station potato salad to investment bankers. Janet Morrison shook her head. This is going to destroy their reputation in Dallas business circles. It gets worse, Robert continued reading. Jake Reynolds, who organized the event, had promised colleagues an impressive display of hospitality. Instead, guests were treated to one of the most unprofessional evenings in recent memory. Multiple attendees left early, citing the hostile family dynamics and poor planning. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was brief. They'd earned every word of that criticism. Robert set down the iPad. Victoria, I need to make a phone call. This is too perfect to pass up. Before I could object, he was dialing. He put the phone on speaker. Barbara Reynolds? This is Robert Hayes from Hayes Industries. We met last night at your event. I could hear my mother's voice, tight with anxiety. Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry about last night. There was a family emergency with my daughter. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to let you know I've just signed a $5 million partnership contract with the most impressive entrepreneur I've ever met. Silence from my mother's end. She runs a company called Apex Hospitality Solutions. Perhaps you've heard of it? The CEO is Victoria Reynolds. The sound my mother made was like all the air being sucked out of her lungs. Your daughter, Victoria, is sitting across from me right now. We've just finalized the largest deal in my company's history with the woman you spent last night calling unemployable. I could hear my mother trying to speak, but only strangled sounds came out. Ms. Reynolds, are you still there? A crash. She dropped the phone. I could hear my father's voice in the background. Barbara? What's wrong? What happened? Robert hung up, grinning. That was even better than I hoped. My phone, which I'd kept on silent, was now lighting up like a Christmas tree. 17 missed calls in the last 3 minutes, all from my parents. Shall we finish signing this contract? Robert asked. I believe we have a celebration to plan. As I signed my name on the $5 million deal, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother just collapsed. What the hell is Apex Hospitality Solutions? The contract was signed, champagne was poured, and my phone was vibrating off the table. Robert's team was celebrating, talking about expansion plans and media announcements. I finally checked my messages. From Mom, answer your phone right now. From Jake, what kind of sick joke is this? From Dad, Robert Hayes just called. Is this real? Are you really a CEO? From Mom again, this is cruel, Victoria. Pretending to be successful to humiliate us. I walked out to the hallway for some quiet and called my father back. He answered instantly. Victoria, your mother is having a complete breakdown. Robert Hayes just told us you own some big company. She thinks you're lying to hurt us. It's not a lie, Dad. I've been running Apex Hospitality for 6 years. Silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from him before, 6 years? You've been a CEO for 6 years and we didn't know. You never asked about my life. You all assumed I was a failure and I stopped trying to correct you. But, how? When? We thought you were between jobs, living in some tiny place. I live in a penthouse in Chicago, Dad. I have 75 employees. I've been featured in Forbes, Business Weekly, Food and Wine. My company is about to be profiled on the cover of Incorporated magazine. Another long silence. Your mother, she told everyone you were unemployed. She's been using you as an example of what happens when you don't apply yourself. I know. I heard it all. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about all the times I'd tried, all the times they dismissed my attempts or immediately changed the subject to Jake's mediocre achievements. Would you have listened? He couldn't answer that. We both knew the truth. Your mother is calling all her friends, trying to do damage control. That article in the Dallas Morning News, everyone's seen it. The country club, the charity boards, everyone. That's not my responsibility, Dad. I know. We did this to ourselves. His voice cracked. We were so focused on Jake's small successes that we completely missed your massive ones. I heard my mother in the background, her voice hysterical. She's lying. She has to be lying. She can barely hold down a waitressing job. Mom, my father said, his voice firm in a way I'd never heard before. Robert Hayes doesn't lie about $5 million contracts. Victoria is telling the truth. A crash, something breaking. Then my mother's voice, raw with desperation, but she can't be successful. She's the failure. Jake is our success story. The phone went quiet. When my father spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. We destroyed our relationship with our successful daughter while praising our mediocre son. Jake makes $65,000 a year, and you just signed a $5 million deal. Dad. No, let me finish. Your mother has been bragging about Jake's consulting job while telling everyone you're unemployed. She served on 3 charity boards based on our successful family reputation. And now everyone knows the truth. I could hear my mother sobbing in the background. Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I want the complete truth. How long have you been successful? 6 years, Dad. I started Apex with $10,000 I saved from waiting tables. I haven't needed your money or support since I was 23. 6 years, he repeated. 6 years of us calling you a failure while you built an empire. The line went quiet except for my mother's crying. I'm sorry, he finally said. I'm so goddamn sorry. We failed you as parents, and we failed ourselves as human beings. It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from either of them. The social consequences for my family came swiftly and brutally. Within 48 hours of Robert's phone call and the viral Dallas Morning News article, their carefully constructed reputation had collapsed like a house of cards. My assistant forwarded me the local news coverage from Dallas. The headline read, "Local Family's Unemployed Daughter Revealed as Multimillion-Dollar CEO." The article included side-by-side photos, one of me signing the Hayes Industries contract, champagne in hand, surrounded by executives, the other from my family's disastrous barbecue, showing takeout containers on my mother's precious china. Jake's frantic texts told the story of their social destruction. Victoria, you need to fix this. The managing partners at my firm are asking questions about my family situation. They're wondering if I can be trusted to handle client relationships if I can't even manage a simple dinner party. Then, 3 potential clients cancelled meetings. They said they don't want to work with someone from a toxic family dynamic. I might lose my job because of what you did. But it was my mother who suffered the most dramatic fall. She'd built her entire social identity around being the mother of the successful child and the manager of the disappointing one. When the truth came out, the cognitive dissonance shattered her world. Sarah Williams, my mother's best friend from the country club, had apparently called her directly after seeing the news coverage. Barbara, I'm confused, she'd said according to my father's account. You've spent years telling us Victoria was unemployed and directionless. But she's on the cover of Business Weekly as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in hospitality. Were you lying to us? My mother couldn't answer. How do you explain that you'd been so determined to see one child as a failure that you'd literally ignored evidence of their massive success? The country club removed her from 2 committee positions. Philosophical differences, they said diplomatically, but everyone knew it was because she'd become a liability. Who wants to work with someone who publicly humiliated their own successful daughter? The charity board where she'd served as treasurer asked for her resignation. We feel it's best if you step back to focus on family matters, their letter had read. Most devastating of all, Jake's networking contacts began distancing themselves. The Goldman Sachs executives who'd attended the barbecue disaster had already been questioning Jake's judgment. When they learned that his unemployable sister was actually more successful than anyone at that party, it became clear that Jake was either delusional or duplicitous. Robert Hayes had made sure of that. True to his word about not working with people who lacked integrity, he'd quietly spread the word in Dallas business circles. Not maliciously, but factually. The Reynolds family situation became a cautionary tale about the importance of treating people well, regardless of their perceived status. Meanwhile, my life exploded in the best possible way. The Hayes Industries contract was just the beginning. The Business Weekly cover story hit newsstands nationwide, featuring me in a power pose outside my Chicago headquarters. The headline read, "Built to Last: How Victoria Reynolds Created a Hospitality Empire While Her Family Thought She Was Unemployed." The article was devastating in its honesty. It detailed how I deliberately avoided using my family name or connections, how I'd built Apex from nothing while enduring years of condescension from the people who should have supported me most. The quote that went viral was this: "My family assumed I was unemployed because it fit their narrative better than success. It was easier to build a multi-million-dollar company than to fight their assumptions." Within a week, I received over 400 inquiries from potential clients. High-end hotels, celebrity event planners, and Fortune 500 companies all wanted to work with a CEO who'd succeeded despite family sabotage. Robert Hayes became my biggest champion, introducing me to his network with barely concealed glee. "This is Victoria Reynolds," he'd say. "She's the entrepreneur whose own family didn't know she was a multimillionaire. If you want someone who's genuinely self-made, she's your person." 5 major contracts came from those introductions, worth a combined $18 million over 3 years. I hired 40 new employees, promoted my best managers, and opened offices in Denver and Atlanta. During our expansion meeting, my CFO, Michelle Torres, said something that resonated deeply. "You know what I love about Apex? You built this company for people who were overlooked. Half our team comes from backgrounds where they were underestimated. We're all proof that other people's limitations don't define us." She was right. Without realizing it, I'd created a company culture that valued hidden talent, that looked past surface impressions to find genuine capability. The media attention continued to snowball. Harvard Business School asked me to speak about building companies without family support. The James Beard Foundation invited me to host their next award ceremony. Food Network approached me about a documentary series working title, Hidden in Plain Sight: The Victoria Reynolds Story. But the moment that felt most significant came when I received a handwritten letter from Dr. Emily Rodriguez, a professor at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. "Ms. Reynolds, I've been following your story, and I wanted you to know that I'm incorporating your case study into my entrepreneurship curriculum. Your experience illustrates something we rarely discuss in business school: how family dynamics can either fuel or sabotage professional success. Your decision to succeed despite their dismissal, rather than because of their support, offers a powerful lesson about self-worth and determination." My story was becoming more than personal vindication. It was becoming a teaching tool for others who felt invisible in their own families. 3 months after the Hayes Industries signing, I finally agreed to speak with my family. I chose a neutral location, the rooftop restaurant at the Four Seasons in downtown Dallas. My territory, my rules, my terms. They looked different when they walked in. Smaller somehow. My mother had lost her imperious confidence, Jake had lost his smugness, and my father seemed to have aged a decade in 3 months. Before anyone could speak, I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "These are my conditions for having any relationship moving forward." They leaned in to read. Equal respect or no contact. No servant treatment, ever. Public acknowledgement of my success and your mistakes. Genuine therapy, family and individual. Jake pays for his own networking events going forward. This is non-negotiable, I continued. I'll be your daughter and your sister, not your cook or your servant. I'll respect you when you respect me. Those are my terms. My mother's eyes filled with tears, real tears, not the manipulative ones I'd seen so often before. "Victoria, we've lost everything. Our reputation, our social standing, our..." She stopped herself. "No, that's not right. We didn't lose anything. We threw it away." "We threw away our relationship with our successful daughter," my father said quietly, "while building our identities around our mediocre son." Jake flinched but didn't argue. For once, he seemed to understand the scope of what they'd all missed. "I go to therapy now," my mother continued. "Dr. Peterson says we created a family system where someone had to fail for everyone else to feel successful. You were assigned the failure role before you were old enough to fight it." "I was jealous," Jake admitted, his voice barely audible. "You were always more capable, more creative, more driven. But Mom made me feel special by making you feel small. I see how sick that was now. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I'm sorry, my mother whispered. Not just for the barbecue disaster, but for 12 years of blindness. I turned you into a servant because I couldn't handle that you might be more successful than the life I'd planned for you. I looked at each of them carefully. I'll consider rebuilding, but understand this, I'm not coming back to the same family dynamic. If we do this, it's as equals. They nodded. And Mom, if you ever want Apex to cater anything for you, you'll pay full price like everyone else. For the first time in months, she smiled, a real smile, not a manipulative one. Fair enough. 6 months later, I hosted my first family gathering since the barbecue disaster, but this time, it was on my terms, in my penthouse, with my rules. My team from Apex catered the event because I no longer cooked for family gatherings. That boundary was non-negotiable and had been the hardest for my mother to accept. During one of our therapy sessions, she'd actually said, "But you're so good at cooking. It seems wasteful not to use that skill for family." Our therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had looked at her with barely concealed amazement. "Barbara, your daughter is a CEO with 75 employees and a multi-million-dollar company. Asking her to cook for you is like asking the pilot to serve peanuts on the plane. She can do it, but it's not the best use of her abilities." That analogy had finally broken through my mother's mental block. Now, as my parents and Jake sat in my dining room being served by my professional staff, the role reversal was complete. But this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about truth. My mother watched my team work with obvious admiration. "Victoria, your staff is incredibly professional. How do you train them to be so?" She searched for the word, coordinated. "We hire people who've been underestimated elsewhere," I explained. "When you give talented people their first real opportunity, they don't take it for granted." Jake, who'd been quieter than usual, finally spoke up. "Can I ask you something? When did you know you were going to be successful?" I thought about it. I didn't know I'd be this successful. But I knew I was capable of more than cooking for your networking events. "I mean, when did you know you were better at business than me?" The question hung in the air. The old Victoria would have deflected, minimized her abilities to spare his feelings. The new Victoria told the truth. "Honestly, when I was 16 and you were 14. You struggled with the lemonade stand Mom set up for you, and I could see 12 ways to improve it. But every time I made suggestions, Mom told me to let you figure it out yourself because Jake needs to build his confidence." My mother winced. "I remember that. I realized then that I had instincts you didn't have, but you were going to get all the opportunities anyway because you were the boy and I was just the daughter who could cook." Jake nodded slowly. "I always knew you were smarter. But I convinced myself that my being male somehow balanced things out. Like the world owed me success because I was a guy, even if I wasn't particularly talented." It was a moment of brutal honesty that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. My father, who'd been mostly quiet during dinner, finally spoke. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. I've been bragging about you at the golf course." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Tom Patterson asked me last week how I'd raised such a successful daughter. I told him the truth. I didn't. You succeeded despite us, not because of us." My mother nodded. "I've been doing the same thing at the country club. When people ask about your success, I tell them it had nothing to do with our parenting. You built everything yourself while we were too blind to see it." It wasn't a full apology, but it was public accountability. That mattered. "There's something else," my mother continued. "I've been nominated to rejoin the charity board. Apparently, having a successful entrepreneur daughter has restored some of our family credibility. But I turned it down." "Why?" "Because I don't want to profit socially from your success after spending years denying it. That wouldn't be right." It was a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected from her. Jake cleared his throat. "I have news too. I'm leaving the consulting firm." "What? Why?" "Because I'm not very good at it, and staying there was just prolonging everyone's embarrassment. I'm going back to school for teaching. It turns out I'm actually good with kids, and I like helping them learn." I was genuinely surprised. "Teaching?" "Yeah. Turns out when you stop trying to be something you're not, you can figure out what you actually are." He smiled sheepishly. "I'll never be a business success like you, but maybe I can be a good teacher. As the evening wound down, my mother asked the question I'd been waiting for. Victoria, can you forgive us? I looked around my beautiful penthouse, at the life I'd built without their help, at the family who was finally seeing me clearly. I already have, Mom. But more importantly, I've forgiven myself for believing your story about who I was supposed to be. My father raised his wine glass. To Victoria. For building something amazing and for giving us a chance to be better. We toasted, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was having dinner with my family rather than serving them. Later that evening, after they'd left, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen, our family therapist. Victoria, I wanted you to know, your family's transformation has been remarkable to witness. Your decision to set boundaries while remaining open to reconciliation shows incredible emotional intelligence. You've basically taught them how to love you properly. I smiled, thinking about how different this felt from the chaotic barbecue disaster that had started it all. My assistant texted me a reminder, Harvard Business School speech tomorrow at 2 p.m. Topic, Success Without Permission, Building Your Own Validation. I'd been invited to share my story with MBA students, many of whom came from families with high expectations and conditional love. The message I wanted to leave them with was simple. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. As I prepared my notes for the speech, I reflected on the journey from invisible daughter to industry leader. The transformation hadn't been just professional, it had been personal, psychological, and ultimately liberating. I opened my laptop and began typing the conclusion to my Harvard speech. Success doesn't require permission from anyone. Not your family, not your friends, not society. It requires permission from yourself. The day you stop waiting for others to validate your dreams and start validating them yourself, that's the day your real life begins. My family spent 12 years treating me like I was invisible, and I spent 6 years building an empire while they remained blind to it. But here's what I learned. Their inability to see my worth was never a reflection of my actual value. It was a reflection of their limitations. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to recognize it. Remember that. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people who don't believe in you is to succeed so spectacularly that they can't ignore you anymore. Not for revenge, but for truth. Because when you finally force people to see you clearly, you give them the opportunity to love you properly. Thank you for your time, and remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You already are. I closed the laptop and looked out at the city lights below. Tomorrow I'd speak to future leaders about the power of self-determination. Next month, I'd open Apex's 6th location. Next year, who knew what was possible? But tonight, I was simply Victoria Reynolds, not the family disappointment, not the invisible daughter, but the woman who'd refused to stay small to make others comfortable. And that, I realized, was more than enough.